We were riding high and thinking that it'd be great to have a session about voting rights. And so we decided we would have a discussion about voting rights. And it was an issues forum because the difference between an issues forum and what we refer to as a brain trust is that we thought that an issues forum deals with an issue that comes and goes. It's not continuing from year to year to year to year to year to year. It's an issue that has a short life. And a brain trust, on the other hand, our health brain trust, our education brain trust, a number of our brain trusts deal with issues that have a long life. They are intractable issues that don't go away. And we thought, based on what we had done in 1992, electing all of these new African Americans to Congress, and the progress that we were making in minority electoral success, that this was a transitional issue that we could deal with once or twice and then it would go away. Well, what happened quickly was that there were this massive onslaught of legal cases attacking the congressional districts, and so I think maybe in 1993 we had an issues forum, maybe in 1994 we called it an issues forum, but at some point very early in the process we said this is not an issue that's going away. This is one of those things that should be converted from an issues forum, a transitional issue, to a brain trust to deal with this on an ongoing permanent basis. So we made the transition to calling it the Voting Rights Brain Trust as opposed to an issues forum. Part of that was because we also, the difference between issues forums and brain trust is that the brain trust typically for the CBC meet year-round. Issues forums, we have them at the annual legislative conference, and then we wait until the next annual legislative conference, we have another issues forum. Brain trust continue year-round. And one of the reasons that we started to view this as a permanent issue that we needed to deal with year-round was that in the process of all the litigation that was going on, we had to develop a cadre of people who could try to defend the existing new minority districts that had been created under the Voting Rights Act. And one of the real champions in that process, much like had happened in connection with Brown versus Board of Education, when social scientists and lawyers and psychologists and everybody got together in the community to try to make the case for desegregating the schools, we thought we needed a group of people that transcended just the legislative community and the legal community and start to bring people together to think about this, how we defend these congressional districts. And the person who convened that first meeting, I still remember it today, it was in North Carolina, in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the Research Triangle, was Judge A. Leon Higginbotham. He stepped forward and volunteered. He was in the practice of law and volunteered to put together a group of lawyers and social scientists and other experts to defend what we were trying to defend. He wrote and prepared the amicus brief on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus in Shaw versus Reno and its progeny, the subsequent cases. And I was at the heart of all that, not as a litigant, but as the poster child for redistricting, because most of the litigation was about my congressional district, was not about me personally. I tried not to take it personally that people were attacking my congressional district. The guy from Durham, Duke University, who was the lead litigant, always went out of his way to tell me that he really liked me personally. He just didn't like my congressional district. What was his name? I can't even remember his name. But he was the lead litigant in, yeah, Robinson Everett, right. Robinson Everett. Every time I would see him, he said, you know, I actually vote for you. He lived in Durham, but he said, your district shouldn't come from Charlotte 150 miles north to Durham, North Carolina. I like you, but I don't like your district. So he kept filing these lawsuits against the district. And so I learned not to take it personally, but I was a staunch defender of minority districts. And so, and A. Leon Higginbotham stepped forward to defend these districts for us. And then at some point, 5 years ago or so, Judge Higginbotham died. 12 years ago. Has it been that long? My goodness. Time flies. Yeah. And we renamed the Braintrust in honor of A. Leon Higginbotham as a memorial. And we always start this Braintrust by doing a memorial tribute to A. Leon Higginbotham. And I just done mine. This man was a giant of a man in terms of defending not only congressional districts or minority voting districts, but in so many other areas of life. And so I'm going to defer to Ted Shaw for a brief memorial to Judge Higginbotham, because there are a number of people in the room who knew him personally, admired and respect him. So I'm going to let Ted do the memorial today. Go.
First, I want to thank Congressman Mel Watt for this opportunity and for inviting me to participate in this forum. We've known each other for many, many years now and done quite a bit of work together on voting rights and other issues. I'm a great admirer of Congressman Watt, and if he calls, I'm going to answer. And so that's why I'm here. But I also want to acknowledge Congressman John Conyers, another one of the great representatives, not only for people in Detroit, but really, you know, there are some congressmen, these are two of them, who are representatives of people far beyond the districts that they technically represent. And I've seen him in action also. We have fought on all kinds of issues, criminal justice issues, voting rights issues, civil rights issues more generally, and it's always an honor to be with him and in his presence. And there's so many friends here and former colleagues mine from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. You know, Damon Hewitt, who's sitting in the audience right here, could be up on this panel. But Christian Clark is, and so it's covered in Judith Brown, who worked at the Legal Defense Fund also. You know, all of the people on this panel are people who are really warriors, and you know, almost all of them are people I know very, very well. A. Leon Higginbotham. I now teach law school at Columbia. And one of the things that I try to make it a habit to do is not only to teach law, but also to teach about those who worked in law, whom this generation of law students didn't know personally, but should know. So, for example, there's not a law student, I don't care what background, what color, it's not a law student in this country who should not learn and know who Charlie Houston was. And yet most law students don't know who he was. There's not a law student who should not know, and certainly not an African-American law student, a student of color, who should not know who A. Leon Higginbotham was. He was physically an imposing man. He was very tall. In South Africa, where he spent time working to challenge apartheid, they called him the Big Chief. And those who clerked for him, Stephanie Moore among others, and knew him well, knew what a hard-working man he was. Now, his history is one that I could spend a lot of time trying to recount, and I couldn't remember everything. He was, during the 1960s, one of the handful of African-American lawyers, that early wave of African-American lawyers, who really stood up not only for civil rights, but for the notion that all Americans should have the blessings of this country. He was appointed to commissions and panels. Eventually, of course, we all know that A. Leon Higginbotham was appointed to the Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Congressman Conyers, I know that you have a panel that is starting next door, is that right? I've been told that, and so it is particularly wonderful that you're here, that you would take the time to be here for these few moments. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. The appointment of A. Leon Higginbotham to the Third Circuit, he was one of the earlier African-American judges appointed to a U.S. Court of Appeals. Still aren't a lot of them who have been appointed, but he was one of the early ones. I remember as a law student, I heard about A. Leon Higginbotham because he had written a book. And one of my mentors in college, Sharice Lilly, who had clerked for him, had helped to do some research on the book. And that was a wonderful book in a matter of color. I want to talk about that a little bit more, but just in case you all missed it, I'm a little slow on the draw, and I need to do more than just say that Congressman Conyers has his Braintrust next door. Apparently, he needs to come up here and speak for a moment. So I'm going to interrupt myself. Congressman Conyers, come on up.
Tez, I'm a little slow on the draw, too. I should have called Conyers first because I should have known he had a panel next door. And I know that he had a wonderful relationship with A. Leon Higginbotham. So I'm going to defer to my chair, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, John Conyers.
Thank you, Chairman Mel Watt, Ted Shaw, and a distinguished and beautiful all-women's panel that you've assembled here.
That's because it was all men last year. So Stephanie condemned me.
Well, we are here on a very important subject, voter rights. And Leon Higginbotham was the kind of person, first of all, I knew him as a wonderful companion, quite a friend, an artful storyteller, a great all-around human being. But he was also a great judge. And that's the part that we all know and respect and admire, particularly in the field that we're examining on this Watt panel here. And so I join you. I note that we've brought a number of people from the Judiciary Committee and from Detroit. Will all of you stand up that are supporting the Conyers-Watt panel in general? Just stand up. Don't look at me like you're surprised. Give these people. What about you? What about you? What about you? Well, all right. Thank you so much. But we're with you. We have hearings or panels going on in adjacent rooms. All the subjects are important. I'm glad this is being filmed because I know that there's going to be conversation and observations that'll be worth us recording and studying far beyond this afternoon when we're together. I congratulate you, Chairman Watt, my dear friend, and you were outstanding at the jazz celebration last night, in which you presented the birthday cake to one of the oldest living musical legends, who was 92 years old. I couldn't believe it. And when the band started up and he was leading the band, all of a sudden he came to life. He wasn't limping and he didn't need any more help. It was just an amazing evening. I'm glad that you and you later were with us. And I thank everyone for this intervention. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Congressman Conyers, Chairman Conyers. So I mentioned in The Matter of Color, the book that Leon Higginbotham authored, and it was a history of the law and African Americans from the arrival of African Americans up through the colonial period. He had a second volume that he wrote years later, Shades of Freedom. He authored many, many articles, but he also eventually stepped down from the bench after serving as really one of the great judges. And I don't have the time to talk about some of his opinions. I remember some of his opinions, particularly one that I'll just signal, and maybe you can find it, in which he was challenged to recuse himself because he was an African American. And the opinion that he wrote was a thing of beauty. Some of us in this room had the honor and the privilege of working with him when Congressman Watt talked about the challenge to drawing majority black congressional districts. And there was a case in Louisiana, Hayes versus Louisiana, which is one of these challenges. And we worked together in that case. He represented the Black Caucus, and the Legal Defense Fund was involved. And it was wonderful to work with him. In his later years, he also was a powerful voice, and I'm not going to mention any names, but he was unhappy with an appointment to a certain position within the judiciary, and he reached up and channeled the great late Thurgood Marshall, Justice Marshall. And he, through that channeling, wrote a letter to this individual who was appointed, that you also ought to go back and read if you never read it. I happened to be in Memphis, and I'll close on this note, some years ago when the NBA invited that individual to come and speak, and there was some controversy about it. And so Charles Ogletree, my good friend, and some others, we put together a forum that hadn't been planned to counter that. And Judge Higginbotham was a moving force in putting that together. And we were in his hotel room, and he said to me at one point in his booming voice, "Ted, do you think I'm being too hard on brother so-and-so?" And I said, "No, Judge, I can't say that I think you're being too hard on him, but I think that you about said everything that that needs to be said." When he died, I remember that he was in the middle, I mentioned this, of, he had just testified during the Clinton impeachment hearings. And when I saw him testify, knowing he had just had earlier that year some serious health challenges, I thought to myself, what are you doing, Judge? You know, you let somebody else do that. But he only knew one speed. You know, all the way through to the end, he was just a warrior. He was one of the great ones. And none of us should ever let him go. So it's a wonderful thing to honor him in this way. Congressman?
Thank you so much. Now, we've been questioned, we get a question every year, generally, why you spend so much time talking about A. Leon Higginbotham? But if you understand the context in which we're operating and how important this man was to this whole redistricting and minority representation fight, it's you know, we must do this. We may pay homage to this giant of a man. So, and actually, usually we open it up to the audience, but I'm not going to do that. People come up and testify about A. Leon Higginbotham. I'm going to forego that this year. Yeah, we got to talk about redistricting. Livonia Ellison says that we got to talk about redistricting. All right, and we have an illustrious panel, and we're getting ready to make that transition over into the discussion about redistricting. Ted Shaw, whom you've already heard from, whom I did not introduce, is currently the professor of professional practice at Columbia University and of counsel to the law firm Fulbright and Jaworski. He's the former director, counsel, and president of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund based in New York, where he worked in several capacities for over 20 years. Started his legal career as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, resigned in protest of the Reagan administration's civil rights policies. I don't know why he's so reluctant to refer to Clarence Thomas after all of that, but he probably just didn't want to beat up on him. And most recently, just recently presented the A. Leon Higginbotham Jr. Memorial Award by the National Bar Association Young Lawyers Division, which is why I didn't have any hesitation about catching him off guard and asking him to do the memorial to Judge Higginbotham. And Ted is actually going to frame this discussion for us today and talk about what's at stake in this whole redistricting process. So you all don't have to hear me again. I'm going to go ahead, much to the contrary to the instructions that Stephanie gave me. I'm going to introduce all of the panelists at one time. The next person is Kristen Clark. She is the co-director of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund's Political Participation Group, where she oversees and coordinates the organization's voting rights and election law docket. Kristen has handled a complex array of constitutional and voting rights litigation, testified before Congress on various election reform matters, has several publications on those topics. Prior to joining the LDF, she worked as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, and she's been a federal prosecutor. She received an undergraduate degree from Harvard University, a law degree from Columbia Law School. Kathy McCulley is the chief of the Census Redistricting Data Office. Her office is responsible for coordinating the dissemination of redistricting data files to the legislative leadership and the executive offices in each state no later than 1 year after the census day, or April 1, 2011. We got to have all the information we need. To meet this mandate, she visits regularly with state and local officials to ensure they are ready for the census. Her office is also responsible for meeting the bilingual requirements of the Voting Rights Act by providing the determinations to the states in timely fashion as required by law. She's a geographer by training and has worked with redistricting since 1983. Judith Brown Dennis. I'm probably pronouncing Dianis. See, I knew I was pronouncing it wrong. Co-director of the Advancement Project, she has an extensive background in civil rights litigation, advocacy in the area of voting, education, housing, employment. She's led and participated in several groundbreaking voting rights lawsuits, represented victims of Hurricane Katrina. Also on the board of Fair Test and a convener of the Forum for Education and Democracy. Taught at the Florida State University Law School and is currently an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. And then the final panelist today will be Julie Fernandez, who is the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights of the Department of Justice, where she is responsible for oversight of the division's work in the areas of voting rights, Title VII, Title IX compliance, and international human rights. Immediately prior to her position at DOJ, she was with the Rayburn Group, a public policy strategy firm. She also served as senior policy analyst and senior counsel at the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, worked for the Department of Justice as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division, served as special assistant to President Bill Clinton at the White House Domestic Policy Council, and she's wonderful as usual. And you should know that Ted, Kristen, and Julie were all instrumental in the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act, which we all worked so hard on and spent some time talking about at last year's Braintrust and maybe year before last, 2 or 3 years ago. See, I lose track of time. I'm going to turn it over to Ted, but before I do, I would be remiss if I didn't mention one other person who was a stalwart in this whole fight, and that's Ron Walters, who died this week. Memorial service being held on Sunday, funeral here in D.C. on Monday, and he was one of those A. Leon Higginbotham type people who in every area that we found ourselves fighting to retain advances that we had made or continuing to try to make additional advances, he was always there, and I'd be remiss if we did not pay tribute to him also. So Ted, stay right there. Get the microphone and frame why this is so important, and then we'll go down the line. Ms. McCulley, Kristen's going to talk about the shifting legal landscape. Kathy's going to talk about building blocks of redistricting. Judith is going to talk about the impact of redistricting on communities of color. And Julie Fernandez is going to make a commitment on behalf of the administration to defend all the work that we do. So that's why we roped in here for that purpose now. We've set her up. She doesn't. She just doesn't know it. Go ahead, Ted. I'm going to be quiet for the rest of the day.
The stakes. Let me talk fairly briefly about the stakes, because I don't know really that we really need to explain the stakes at great length to this audience. But as you have heard, many of us have worked hard to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act, to enforce the Voting Rights Act, to make sure that African Americans, among all people, Latinos, others, do have a meaningful right to cast a ballot. There are many moving pieces to the electoral process and to voting rights, and how voting rights interacts with the electoral process. And my former colleague from the Legal Defense Fund, Kristen Clark, just shared with me a guide that I presume that she will talk about, but among other pieces of literature, it lays out in wonderful fashion this relationship. You all will remember when President George W. Bush was in the White House, and Karl Rove spent a good deal of time trying to engineer the redrawing of districts in Texas as well as other places. And the goal there, frankly, was to write Democrats off of the map. And by the way, I'm in a position that I'm still getting used to after a few years. I no longer have to be careful about being nonpartisan. Some folks here do, and I understand, we all understand and respect how that works. But Karl Rove was trying to write Democrats really off of the map as much as he could. In our litigation, we fought in many instances not for partisan reasons, but to make sure that African Americans and Latinos were able to cast a meaningful vote, but also ultimately that they were able to elect representatives of their choice, or at least have the chance to do that. The redistricting process, which comes along after the census every 10 years, is a process whereby in the past, in most states, there was an understanding that there was going to be a redrawing of districts in a way that compromised, that engaged in compromise, so that both Republicans and Democrats would have a fair chance at some representation among congressional delegations and in other elected offices, even though the party that was in power, the governor in any given state, of course, has a great deal to say about, and the party in power about who gets the majority of the shares of political spoils. What's at stake in 2011 is a little bit different in some respects than maybe it had been in the past, because what Karl Rove's moves signaled was that all bets were off. Some of the understanding that existed in the past with respect to redistricting was off the table. You've been hearing after the primaries this last week about the Tea Party, and you've heard about what's going to happen in the election in the fall. Well, redistricting will determine how seats are drawn, who has a chance, a meaningful chance to compete for and in elections. It will mean a great deal with respect to whether African Americans continue to have the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. You know, there is still a phenomenon that exists that is called racially polarized voting in spite of the election of President Obama. And in fact, if you do a careful analysis, and it's been done already, of the election, the presidential election, you will see that there was a great deal of polarized voting in spite of the fact that President Obama was elected to office. And so this is the framework or the background for democracy. What's at stake is important to political parties. It's important to African Americans, Latinos, indeed all voters. And what's at stake in this election is important to democracy and who and what we are as a nation. You hear the rhetoric about take the country back, you know, about as if somehow or another some people who have won political office somehow or another are aliens, don't have the right to participate in the political process. So this is the game board. You know, the redistricting is the game board that you know, will determine whether or not we can compete for elected office and whether or not some things will be taken back. There's not much that's bigger than this in my view. The stakes are huge. And there's a huge battle going on right now about who we are and what we are as a nation. And this is the game board on which that battle will be played out, and it's no game.
Well, thank you. I want to first start off by thanking Congressman Watt and Stephanie Moore for the invitation to participate in this very timely and important discussion about redistricting. I've attended the Braintrust for several years and always find it to be one of the most substantive discussions that takes place during the CBC weekend. So again, it's a real honor. I want to just add one small point to the frame that Ted just very carefully laid out, and that is that we go into this upcoming redistricting cycle at a very interesting moment. This year actually marks the 45th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. And as everyone in the room knows, there is no law that's been more successful or effective in helping secure and protect minority voting rights than the Voting Rights Act. But interestingly enough, this kind of celebratory moment in our democracy also comes at a time where we're under attack. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, widely regarded as the heart of the Voting Rights Act, is under attack. In the last several months, there have been 3 cases filed in the D.C. District Court that all take aim at Section 5, constitutional challenges that aim to gut the Act. It looks like one of those cases may be dying a quick death, but there's still 2 that are pending, and it's uncertain whether one of those cases will make its way before the Supreme Court. But what we do know is that the litigants in all of these cases have their eyes on getting a result in place that may impact redistricting, that would essentially gut Section 5's protections at the time that we need it most. When you look at the trajectory of how Section 5 operates throughout the decade, it's at the moment of redistricting where you tend to see the most discrimination from those jurisdictions that are covered under Section 5. 2011 to 2013, I'm certain will be no different. I think tremendous vigilance will be required among all of us to ensure that we protect the fragile gains that have been made throughout the decades and to protect those minority voting districts that remain in place. So I just wanted to make sure that that was part of the frame, because what all of that means, I think, is that we're going to have to be very strategic and careful in thinking about what challenges we can present to the courts during this redistricting cycle. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act stands on fragile ground. We hope that the Justice Department will stand up to forcefully defend Section 5 in these cases, and there are many civil rights organizations, including LDF, MALDEF, the ACLU, the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, who are all already standing on the front lines to defend Section 5. But it's very important, I think, for those cases to be on your radar and part of the framework that we go into this next redistricting cycle with. So I wanted to talk very briefly about some of the resources that are available and some of what's changed with respect to the legal standards before I pass the microphone. The Legal Defense Fund is hosting a very important training. Every year we do a civil rights training at the Airlie Conference Center in Warrenton, Virginia, right outside of D.C. And this year we'll be doing a 2-day training that's focused on all you need to know about redistricting, the nuts and bolts of redistricting, how the Voting Rights Act plays into redistricting, and there are a number of people in the room who will be participating in that conference, including Julie Fernandez and Anita Earls, among others. So I encourage all of you to attend. Under the census bags that are on most of the chairs in the room, there's a folder, an LDF folder that has some important resources, and I want to make sure that everybody in the room gets a copy of those folders before you leave. The most important resource in those folders is this, a guide that Ted mentioned, The Impact of Redistricting in Your Community. It's a guide that LDF produced along with MALDEF and the Asian American Justice Center that lays out all the nuts and bolts of redistricting, talks about the legal standards that have changed over the prior 10 years, and talks about the very central role that the Voting Rights Act plays in redistricting. So please make sure that you get a copy of this, bring it back to your community, and contact us if you need more copies. There's some other additional educational material that you'll find in there that talks about independent redistricting commissions and prison gerrymandering and so forth. So what's happened over the past 10 years? There have been a number of cases that have come down from the Supreme Court, but I think one of perhaps the most important cases that kind of changes the landscape for us somewhat is Bartlett versus Strickland. This was a case that was decided by the Supreme Court last term and essentially has redefined what we deem to be majority-minority districts under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So what happened in this case? The question in this case essentially was, in order to bring a Section 2 claim under the Voting Rights Act, whether litigants have to show that if they were successful, once they reach the remedial phase, could they constitute at least 50% of the district? So does majority-minority district mean just that you constitute at least 50% or more of any remedial district that's drawn at the end of the day? At issue in this case was what we call an influence district, a district that was approximately 39% African American in the Pender County area of North Carolina, and African American voters in this particular region of the state, along with a small but reliable level of crossover support from white voters, had elected black candidates of choice throughout the years. The state endeavored to protect this district as one required by the Voting Rights Act, and the court issued a ruling that essentially says that these districts are no longer required, that elected officials are free to draw these influence districts if they'd like, but that they're no longer required by the Act. Anita Earls, who's sitting right there in the third row, of course, played a very central role in that case. And so what does this mean? Many Congressional Black Caucus members, for example, sit in districts that are less than 50% African American. Congressman Watt, your district, for example, would be one. And those districts, I believe, will continue to be protected because North Carolina, for example, is protected by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which continues to prohibit backsliding. But I think what remains to be seen is what happens in those states that are not covered under Section 5. We need to make sure that those districts are not singled out and dismantled. In fact, there's some language in the Bartlett ruling that suggests that if elected officials were to make a to strategically go after those districts and to dismantle them, that could be deemed discriminatory, purposeful action that remains challengeable under Section 2. But we've got to keep a close eye, essentially, on what's happening with the influence districts in non-Section 5 covered states. That's one big and very important issue that I just wanted to make sure I put on the radar. I also want to take a moment to talk about the problem of prison gerrymandering, which is getting a lot more attention this cycle, but an issue that many don't know a whole great deal about. The Census Bureau has a practice of counting incarcerated persons where they are held, rather than at their home addresses, in spite of the fact that most states have constitutional or statutory provisions stating that incarcerated persons remain legal residences of the places that they lived at prior to arrest. This is a problem that we call prison gerrymandering. It has the effect of inflating population numbers and thus the political representation of those areas where prisons and jails are located. It distorts the 14th Amendment's principle of one person, one vote, which requires that election districts have the same number of constituents or residents, and that everyone living outside of a prison district suffers from a dilution of their voting power as a result. Communities of color particularly suffer as a result of prison-based gerrymandering. The incarcerated population in our country is disproportionately comprised of persons of color. Black folks, for example, make up 13% of the population, but are 41% of the populations of federal and state prisons. So the dilution of minority voting strength that results here is clear. But this cycle, states will have a unique opportunity to correct this problem. The Census Bureau has announced that it will, for the very first time, release what we call group quarters residence data, including data on prisoners, early enough for states to make adjustments and to reallocate these persons to their true residences for purposes of redistricting. Let me give you an illustration of the problem and how stark it is. In New York, for example, 66% of the state's prisoners come from New York City. 66%, but 91% of them are incarcerated in rural places in upstate New York, 91%. In the 2000 census, over 43,000 New York City residents were counted as members of the upstate communities where they were jailed because of prison-based gerrymandering. And if you made adjustments and took that population out, there would be at least 7 senatorial districts in the state that would not meet or satisfy one person, one vote requirements. So pretty significant problem, and there's a potential for states to make adjustments to correct for it this cycle. There are some states, including Rhode Island and New York, that have adopted legislation to correct for prison gerrymandering, and we've got information in those folders that talks more about this issue. So I'll conclude there, but look forward to having a more rigorous exchange with you all during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy McCulley, in charge of the Redistricting Data Office at the Census Bureau. I'd like to thank Congressman Watt and Mr. Shaw for inviting the Census Bureau to participate, and I'm truly honored to be representing the Census Bureau today. When I saw that I was following Kristen, I was like, uh-oh, because I'm always mesmerized when I sit in the audience and listen to her. I wanted to bring to your attention, we did bring some census bags. Inside the blue folder is what I would do if I had 45 minutes to speak, and we're going to be moving quickly today through the panel. So there's a longer presentation there for you that might stimulate some questions, but I'm going to stick to my 5 to 7 minutes and go through a number of things for you. The census is just about here. Public Law 94-171 requires that we deliver the data to the legislative leaders and the executive staff in each state no later than 1 year after Census Day, and we're right on track in order to do that. You're well aware that the apportionment numbers will be delivered to the President at the end of this year, only 9 months after the census was collected this past spring, and I know that folks are anxiously awaiting those numbers. What I want to do quickly is go over what the products will be for the redistricting data that will go out to the legislative leaders and the governor's offices. That in particular, Kristen mentioned the elections this fall, and Mr. Shaw did as well. The elections are a challenge for the Census Bureau as well, because the mandate is that we deliver the data to that leadership, and we have all but 4 states up for re-election in the state legislatures this November, which means basically 6,300 legislators are up for re-election, and that could change the legislative leadership, so we'll be watching that carefully. In addition, 37 governors are up for re-election, and of course we have to deliver to the governors. So we too will be watching the elections to make sure that we satisfy the requirements of Public Law 94-171. Let me get quickly into the data products. Beginning in November, we will deliver the Tiger Line shape files. These are the geographic files that basically provide a seamless layer of census geography to all those who are interested in marrying up the geography with the data. If you're involved in redistricting, you must do the marriage between the geography and the data. This will be the first release of the 2010 census blocks. We know that there will be a rapid increase in the number of blocks that we are delivering. Right now, I think we're going from about 8 million to possibly over 11 million blocks, census blocks. This will be the first look at the block groups. It'll be the first look at the census tract boundaries. And what folks involved in redistricting will do is they will take that Tiger shape file and merge it in with their administrative records, their voter registration, their voter return data. They will set that data up in anticipation of receiving the Public Law 94-171 data. We will also be providing block assignment files for those that don't want to get deep into Tiger shape files, basically aligning congressional districts, legislative districts, voting districts, counties, incorporated areas, and American Indian areas, and providing the blocks that are associated with that particular geography, the string of information. We'll have 4 map types. We'll have the traditional county block maps, which provide you with that fine detail that's required, really, in order to get this one person, one vote mandate established. We'll have census tract reference maps. We'll have school district reference maps, and we'll have census tract reference maps. Why are we offering school district reference maps this time? Because the states told us after the 2000 census that they wanted to see school districts included in the summary levels for the data that we deliver beginning the first week of February. We have some states with very tight deadlines to get their redistricting accomplished and to get it to where they need to send it. So states like Mississippi, New Jersey, Virginia, Louisiana, they're going to be the first states out the door. We are trying to do the best we can to meet the mandates of some of those states that have extremely tight deadlines. So we're including school district summary levels. Also new to the PL file, it's a very simple file of 4 tables, but we've added an additional 5th table this time around. So you'll have total population, population by race, ethnicity, and voting age. On the housing side, we're adding a table on housing vacancy status. So you will have counts of vacancy, occupied, and vacant as part of your PL file. It's very simple in terms of the tables. It's very, very rich in terms of the geography. So you will have those 5 tables at all levels of geography that will support the redistricting that many folks will be involved in. I've mentioned the tables. Kristen mentioned the issue of prison-based gerrymandering. We did announce, working with Congressman Clay's office, that we would release the advanced group quarters file in early May of 2011. We'll have just gotten out the redistricting data by the end of March. So in early May, we will have a companion file. It will be a very simple table of counts for group quarters. Group quarters includes college dormitories, nursing homes, prison incarcerated locations. It will be down to the block level, and it will only provide you with counts. So for example, if you have a block with a nursing home and a prison, you would get 2 counts, one for the prison population, one for the nursing home population. If you also had a block with 3 prisons located within that block, you will get 1 count for that block of the prison-based population. So that data will be released. I talked about the redistricting data going on top of administrative data, on top of the census geography. This file will be laid on top of everything else that they've gotten and will be used to analyze redistricting plans with group quarters populations in mind as they review and analyze the plans. We are also releasing the 5-year estimates from our American Community Survey. That survey is basically the long-form type data that we have been collecting over the last 5 years that will be released for state legislative districts as well as congressional districts. That data will be made available the end of December, and I think will be of interest to folks because they will be waiting for their redistricting data, and they'll get sort of a preview, a profile of current information for their legislative districts and their congressional districts. We will have a wealth of information coming out starting in November, December, January, February, March, April, and May. It could get confusing at times. My card is in the folder of materials. I also want to mention the chief of our Congressional Affairs Office is here today, Angela Manso, and her number is 301-763-6100. I encourage you, when you see all these things coming out at you, to give Angela or myself a call. We'll be happy to try to help you because we know that it's just going to be a bombardment of products coming out to you. We're also going to be producing some special tabulations with the Department of Justice. We will produce a CVAP special tab, which will come out after the block group data. And we'll also be working towards the Section 203 data. I'm going to stop there and turn it over, but I welcome your questions at the end. Thank you.
Getting up because I have a PowerPoint. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Judith Brown-Dianis, and I'm co-director of Advancement Project. I first wanted to start by thanking Congressman Watt for having me. It's quite humbling to be here on this panel with him because he's not only a congressman, but he's a scholar, a lawyer. He's someone who has had to defend his district time and time again. And so he knows more about redistricting than more folks. And his counsel, Nita Earls, is here also, who's one of the leading experts on redistricting in the country. And then this next one is the state house elections, again, with those who are involved in redistricting, showing the pluses and the asterisks. So we're talking about 46 states with state legislative elections this fall. 37 of those have power over redistricting. Let's not forget the gubernatorial elections. There are 37 gubernatorial seats up this fall. And when we look at those 37, 31 of the 37 governors have veto power over redistricting. So again, if we do not get folks out to vote, we will find that, and I've been reading about this, so I won't be partisan, but I've been reading about the Republican effort to take over the redistricting process by winning these elections. It's a long-term plan of what will happen with redistricting. So let me talk just first about the system. So, of course, redistricting is a partisan system in most places, but the only way to get out of the partisan system and to have accountability is to have communities involved in the process. And we have got to get folks, and I know people's eyes glaze over when you talk about redistricting, they don't want to be involved, but we have to be involved in this process. Whether it's an independent commission or done by the state legislature, the only way to impact it is to be at the table. That means going to hearings and giving testimony about your community, the cohesiveness of that community, discrimination in the past, voting rights problems, and racial appeals in campaigns. And working with others to draw plans. The thing that will be different about this redistricting cycle is technology. Part of the reason that we haven't been able to be at the table is because we haven't had access to technology. Things have changed in the past 10 years greatly with regard to the availability of technology. From Advancement Project, we're going to be working with community groups focusing on engaging them in the redistricting process. We're building a system through our Healthy City system, which is healthycity.org, which is right now built for California, which has 900 data sets for the state of California. We'll be building that out for a number of states, and it's going to be free and direct access to the technology and necessary data. The system will be built upon the Healthy City platform. What the system will do is connect initial demographic analysis and planning. We'll look at unity and unity planning. And really, this is all about how do we get our communities to work together. Looking at interactive maps and plan creation and initial analysis, interactive and summary data reports, sharing your created plans to partners for feedback, so there'll be online sharing and you can work on maps together, and producing materials and media for the public. So one of the things that we really at Advancement Project, and I know a number of groups are really talking about, is the importance of having unity plans. Redistricting is about cutting up the political pie. And too often the African American community has got a little old sliver. So now the issue is whether or not we're able to get a hunk of the pie instead of the sliver. And so in order to do that, we really have to think about how communities of color can work together. African Americans are geographically located in many places in close proximity to or in the same neighborhoods as Latinos and Asians. We've got to look at expanding the power by working with groups who have similar interests, building what we call at Advancement Project unity tables with those who have the same interests and concerns and face the same issues, and shows political cohesiveness. This is really important this go around, and especially because, of course, we see the courts backing off of using race as a factor. Of course, we know that demographics in this country are changing. That's the other issue, dramatically changing. So we have got to work together because that's the way in which we will gain. So I just wanted to walk you through like a little example. And for those who are from California, like my friend Crystal in the back, this is not a real life example. This is examples of how demographics have changed. This is not a real redistricting. I'm not going to draw the district for Assembly District 52, so don't yell at me when that happens. Okay, so this map is showing you, the darker the color, it's showing you the concentration of African Americans. So the dark one has 218, this is for the census blocks, and it shows you where the concentrations have been in Isidore Hall in California, in LA. So that's the African American population. Now get ready, because here you are going to see the change. This is the change. Okay, the dark brown areas are the loss of African American population. So let me go back. This is what it was. This is where the loss is, in the dark brown areas. The purple areas are where there have been gains. So clearly, in many places throughout the country, it would behoove us to be working together on redistricting plans, where we see common interests. I'm sure in North Carolina you have seen a growth in the Latino population, and that we have got to figure out how we can come together around these plans. Okay, let's focus in on a little smaller place. Now, one thing I have to say is don't ask me any questions about this technology, because my folks in California built it. I know nothing about it. I'm just a little lawyer. I like these pretty little pictures, though. So we're going to focus in on this area that's in the red circle. Okay, when we look at the shifts in demographics, now we see that this area is only 28.3% African American. It is now intensely Latino at 67%. Here's where we start talking about communities of interest. 50% of the adults in that area have no high school degree. Over 1 in 5 have no health insurance. So here's where we can start to think about what are the things that bind us and the factors in our communities that make us a cohesive group, and perhaps we have the same interests at heart and want representatives who are going to represent us on these particular issues. 2/3 of them are registered Democrats. So this is an area where we could potentially see some overlap and working together towards a map. So you could see that the next thing that our system will be able to do will be to take this area and build out a map giving you the population of that area and building on across the board so that you actually have a district. So in closing, I just wanted to reiterate again that this time around, we got to be smart about how we get gains. We got to be unified in how we do it. And we have to go across the barriers to talk about where we have common interests, because ultimately this is about making sure that we're able to elect representatives who are responsive and accountable to our communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Am I on? Okay, great, thanks. So first, I also want to, I'm Julie Fernandez from the Justice Department, here to be accountable to the demands. Now, I'm here to talk about what we are going to do to get ready for this round of redistricting. I have to start out, like many of my panelists did, and to say again how honored I am to be with this group, who are people who I've worked with for so many years and have unending respect for in the work that they do. But also just to thank Congressman Watt and to underscore what Judy just said about having had his district challenged so many times, the Supreme Court so many times, and to have been really one of the leaders in Congress during the reauthorization. Mel was an architect of this effort in such a profound way. It wouldn't have been possible had he not been the chair of the CBC at that time when this effort got underway. It was sort of kismet, as they say, and it was lucky for all of us, and lucky that I got to work with him and many others, and I see Congressman Scott back there who just came in too, to try and get all this done. So I'm grateful to be here and grateful to have this opportunity to be in the Justice Department again. I was there when Anita had my job 10 years ago, and happy to be back again to try and be as good as she was. So the Voting Rights Act. We all know what the Voting Rights Act has done, what Section 5 has done to transform our country, and to give all Americans the opportunity to elect their candidates of choice. That we can see now, and I always have to start by remembering that we can see now the progress that we've made is tremendous and profound. We would not be talking this way if we hadn't had the Voting Rights Act. We wouldn't have these members of Congress. We wouldn't have the country that we have now. It is not 1964, but it's also not where we think we need to be. We have a lot more work to be done, and part of that work is our role in enforcing the Voting Rights Act. One thing that's really critical, I think, in this round of redistricting, which is reflected in this panel today, is the intense level of engagement from many in the advocacy community, many of whom also know the process so well and are ready to kind of step up and be be strong advocates and vigilant protectors of the enforcement program and supporters of many of our work. Now, elected officials, and there's some talk, Judy was talking some talk about politics and the political outcome, and I'm not talking about that. Elected officials and many members and others have lots of goals and objectives they bring to the redistricting process. But our big message from the Civil Rights Division is that we have one job. I have one job, and that's to help ensure that plans submitted by the states under Section 5 don't discriminate against racial or language minority voters. I have one job. As you know, under the Voting Rights Act, we have all or part of 16 states that have to get their voting changes pre-approved, either by us or by the district court in D.C. Most come to us because we're faster, we're more efficient, it's a simpler process, it's a cheaper process, and it's a fair process, and I think it is generally recognized to be an expeditious and fair review. Some people don't. Some people will go to the DDC because they think that will be a better process for them, and some will go to the DDC because they see it as an appropriate forum to challenge the constitutionality of our statute. So while we are looking to try and do the best work we can do to protect minority voting rights and to continue the vigilance of enforcement around Section 5, we have to look at this process aware of the fact that we are walking into, likely happens every cycle, that we are walking into more constitutional challenges as we go forward. So, by this time next year, the voting section at the Civil Rights Division will be neck deep in analyzing what we estimate will eventually total approximately 2,700 redistricting plans from the jurisdictions covered by Section 5. 2,700 plans, because this is not about Congress. It's a little bit about Congress. It's a lot about school boards, about county commissions, about all kinds of special districts across the country, city councils. That's really where much of the heat of redistricting happens, is at the state and local level, state legislatures as well. By our estimates, we will receive a majority of these plans in the first 18 months after the census data is received. We anticipate being something like 3/4 of the way through this process by December of 2011. So if any of you want to send me some coffee, tea, additional chocolates, I'm looking forward to that over the next year. It is an amazingly daunting task for us. Determining whether a redistricting plan meets Section 5 standards is one of the most significant and complex analyses the division. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am. I'll give you. Is one of the most significant and complex analyses that the division performs. Each plan is unique on its facts, and our responsibility is to evaluate each plan on its facts to determine whether it has met its burden of establishing that the voting change in question, quote, does not have the purpose, and will not have the effect of diminishing the ability of any citizens of the United States on account of race or color to elect their preferred candidates of choice. So what are examples of what we're looking for? Whether a racial or ethnic minority group is packed into only one district, where they may have been able to elect candidates of choice in more than one, whether a group is fragmented, so they are unable to elect their candidate of choice, or whether the percentage of minority voters has been reduced to make them now unable to elect their candidates of choice, right? The focus of the Section 5 analysis, and this comes out of the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act and some litigation that happened before that from Georgia versus Ashcroft, for those of you that follow this intensely. The focus of our inquiry is on the ability to elect your preferred candidate of choice. If when we match the new data to the geography, the existing geography, and we see a diminishment, the question is going to be, is there a diminishment in the ability to elect candidates of choice? We are not tethered to this notion of majority-minority districts. We're looking to see whether the district performs for the community. And if it performs, we need to protect it. So what are we doing to get ready besides being grateful for more chocolates? First, this summer, we published in the Federal Register proposed revisions to our Section 5 Administrative Review Guidelines. These guidelines provide a roadmap to the Section 5 process for jurisdictions and other stakeholders. We are also planning to produce a guidance document before the next round gets underway, similar to what we did in 2000, to try and just provide a more narrative more narrative discussion of how we plan to analyze some of the problems that come up in redistricting. We were trying very hard to have a completely transparent process about how we're doing this, how we think about it, and as we go around the country talking to elected officials and others, transparency is our friend in the redistricting process. For those who draw lines and for those of us who are advocates, the thing to advocate for the most is transparency. Let it be known what is, what's on the table, what choices are being made, how are those choices being made, why are those choices being made. That only helps those advocating for the rights of minority voters. The revisions in the guidelines that we've just published for comment reflect the changes. A lot of it reflects sort of things that have changed in practice but hadn't changed in the guidelines themselves. Others reflect changes in the law since the reauthorization, and others sort of mild inconsistencies that we've tried to straighten up in this most recent set of guidelines. We're also working very closely with the Census Bureau, who have been outstanding partners in this work to ensure that we have the best data in the best form, most accessible when we need it. It has been I love the census meetings, I have to say, because you come out of it like, wow, they are on it. So I have to say it's an impressive group of folks and an impressive program. And we've been working very closely with them to make sure we have the right data. This is also the first time that having results from the American Community Survey, which are going to be utilized in the Section 203 process. So it is also another challenge that we have. We have a new way of compiling data, a new way of counting folks, a new way of getting information, and we're trying very hard to make sure it's accurate, and I think that it will be. In addition, this is great news, which I'm sure we've talked about before. The Division's 2010 budget contains substantial increases in personnel resources to evaluate the plans. We have hired, I think, 14 new analysts in the voting section, I think somewhere around 10 new lawyers. Judy's mad because we took 2 of her lawyers. Whatever. We're out there poaching from here and there. But it is... Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Whose lawyers didn't we take, right?
Whose lawyers didn't you take?
Sorry.
Right.
Hey, it's an open process. So we're lucky that we're ramping up and trying to get ready, though, of course, we always need the support and the contribution of advocates from all communities, from around the jurisdiction. We do need and want to hear from everyone impacted by these redistricting plans so we can make a fair analysis of what was really happening on the ground. We're making upgrades to our computer system. I'm not sure we can do what you're doing over there, but we don't want to, right? So we're doing all upgrades to our computer system, our GIS systems, and we're just working hard to make sure that when we do this, we do it right, we do it credibly, we do it with integrity, we do it in a transparent way, and we do it in a way that protects minority voters. Kristen and others already mentioned the constitutional challenges, and I mentioned them briefly. It is something that that is important in thinking about. It is really, we're in the middle of an existential moment. Oh, I have to wrap up. Of course I will. We're in the middle of this existential moment that we have to address and we have to be ready for, and the Justice Department is very committed. The Attorney General has said time and again to vigorous defense of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. The President and the Attorney General are very committed to that. But we can't let our concern about challenges to the Act in any way impact our work under Section 5 and our Section 5 review. And those of us who know this issue well know what I'm talking about. We have to do what we think is right under the statute and not be too worried about everybody trying to sue us to shut us down. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can defend the statute and we can enforce the statute. And that's what we are committed to doing. So I want to say again how happy I am to be here and happy with my friends and welcome any questions you all have. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Every time we put a panel together for this topic, we realize the dynamic has changed since last year. And we're trying constantly to present a panel that is relevant to what is about to happen. So I want you please to join me in thanking this panel because I think they've gotten us now, where did Bobby go? Here he is. Come up here. No, I want you up here on the. All right, well, I have to talk about you before you can ask a question. That's the rule here, since I'm controlling this. And at least 5 times today I've had to say to people, no, I'm not insulted that you thought I was Bobby Scott. He's one of the few people that I don't get insulted when somebody says, aren't you Bobby Scott? I said, yeah, I'm not Bobby Scott, but I feel honored that you would think that I was Bobby Scott. Bobby Scott and I have been sitting beside each other in the Judiciary Committee for 18 years now. And I consider him my best friend in Congress. I'm not sure he feels the same way about me. I'm not going to put him on spot to respond to that. But a lot of people don't know us apart. And so when Bobby goes to the floor and creates controversy, my phones are likely to light up. And when I go to the floor and create controversy, his phones are likely to light up. So I usually try to beat him to the floor so that it'll be his phones that light up rather than mine. So this is Bobby Scott from Virginia, and a knowledgeable lawyer and legislator who knows as much about redistricting as any of us also. So you can make a speech now, you can ask a question, whatever you want to do.
Mel, you just reminded me of what Senator Bennett from Utah, no, it was Alan Simpson. Alan Simpson said he was at the airport one day, and somebody walked up to him and said, "You look just like Alan Simpson, Senator Alan Simpson. Anybody ever tell you that before?" And he said, "Oh, yes, they tell me that frequently." And that man said, "Makes you mad, doesn't it?" Mel and I've been sitting beside each other, and we are best friends because it's not infrequent that we'll be on the short end of a 38-2 vote on the Judiciary Committee, standing up for principle, which is not always done in the Judiciary Committee. And it's already been said that Mel has been the leader on redistricting issues and voting rights and led the charge on our behalf. When we reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, he was adept, he was very knowledgeable. And when the dust settled, we had about the best deal anybody ever thought we could get because Mel was so persuasive with the other members of the House and the members of the Senate. So we have a good Voting Rights Act because of Mel Watt.
Thank you. I paid him to say that, y'all.
My question was, and I'm not sure if it came up.
You want some chocolate too?
Before I got here. Is when, and I think Julie kind of referred to it, and that is it my understanding, Julie, that when the Justice Department looks at the number necessary to elect, you're not looking at some arbitrary arithmetic number, but a locally tailored assessment of what is needed in that district?
Absolutely.
Sometimes you talk about 60% may not be enough. Some places, other places, 40% is an absolute gimme.
Right.
So you have to look directly. And the other is, there's been some concern under some of the case law as to whether when you are performing well and electing candidates of choice, but happen to have a district under the arithmetic 50%, whether that district is protected under the Voting Rights Act. There are many members of the Congressional Black Caucus that get elected year after year after year in districts that arithmetically aren't under 50%. And there's some concern that those districts may not be protected. We would hope they would be, and I'd like a comment.
Yeah, I think the language in the statute says diminishing the ability of the minority community to elect their candidates of choice.
Good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's Bobby Scott, y'all. I'm Mel Watt. That's Bobby Scott. When you see us in the hall, don't insult him by calling him Mel Watt. Insult him by calling him Bobby Scott. Let me make a couple of comments following up on what the panel says, and then we'll go to questions and answers from or discussion with the audience. First of all, it occurred to me during the presentation that we always assume that folks in the audience have a level of knowledge about things that we don't always know they have. How many of you know whether you are from a Section 5 state or jurisdiction? How many? I should ask the question the other way. How many of you don't know whether you're from a Section 5? How many of you don't know what a Section 5 jurisdiction is? Which one of you all wants to spend a minute telling? So, and that's because I just don't want you to walk out of here not knowing that there are distinctions in the Voting Rights Act between Section 5 and Section 2.
Right. So Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act covers the entire country. That's the straight-up vote dilution statute, which is how you would go after voting discrimination in many different forms. Section 5 of the Act applies to all or part of 16 states. Those are states that essentially were those who had the worst record of voter disenfranchisement at the time the Act was first enacted in 1965. So it's essentially a lot of the Deep South, a number of counties in North Carolina, a few in California. Deep South includes Texas, a couple of counties in New York. So it's that swath of states. And those states have those jurisdictions in those states, or those counties in states that aren't fully covered, like North Carolina, have to submit any changes that affect voting to either DOJ or the district court in D.C. for a determination that they're non-discriminatory before they can be implemented.
And we fought to retain that pre-clearance provision when we renewed the Voting Rights Act. A number of people were saying that that was no longer needed. It discriminated against southern states. There wasn't any more recent history of discrimination by those states than there was in other states, and it was for that reason we spent a bunch of time building a 12,000-page record for the Supreme Court to know that there's still discrimination taking place in a number of the states, in those states and jurisdictions that are covered by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. So find out, first of all, if you don't know whether you're in a Section 5 or jurisdiction or not. I think that can be important to some people. The second thing I was reflecting on as we were going through this is that this is a massive undertaking that we are about to engage in here. We think about it in our own terms, and I want to discourage you from doing that. It would be easy for the members of the Congressional Black Caucus to say, let's just protect the congressional minority districts and try to see whether there are areas that we might be able to gain some minority districts. But this is not only about congressional redistricting. Every 10 years, based on the census, all districts, all voting districts in America have to be reevaluated and adjusted, okay? Based on population, and that's because to have a district that has 500,000 people and a district that has 250,000 people does not comply with the one person, one vote requirement of the Constitution. So when we think about this, we can't think of it only in terms of what's happening at the congressional level. We got to talk about state House, state Senate. We got to talk about city councils, county commissions, school boards, every elective office in the United States. And this is a massive, massive undertaking that is going to be taking place between now and after this election, between now and the next set of elections. It has to be done everywhere. And that's why this is so important for all of us to be engaged in and knowledgeable at some level about this. The second challenge is not only is it massive, it is very technical. You know, you're dealing with block level, precinct level, street level information that's been developed by the United States Census Count, the Census Bureau, and you saw those maps that were put up on the board, and it occurred to us, it has occurred to us that that people out in local communities will need help, and we are trying to put together a proactive method of being able to help people. That's why the presentation from the advancement project was so important. They are proactively involved in it. Anita Earls, who's been mentioned several times by the panelists up here, she's not on the panel because she used to be my law partner, and and she was the litigator who defended my congressional district. So we don't always give her the dap that she's due. But I want to stand up and just go to the mic just for a second and talk about some of the things that that your organization has been doing. She was Julie Fernandez's predecessor at the Civil Rights Division. She did this 10 years ago. And then she went back out into the private sector and is running an organization. So I'd be remiss if we didn't hear a little bit about what you're doing and your organization is doing, just to be proactively ready to help local communities in this very complex area.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the panel. It was a very helpful and informative presentation. So I will just be really quick and say I brought with me a one-pager on resources for redistricting that are available on the internet. The one resource I want to put in your mind is www.redistrictinginstitute, all one word, .org. That's a website where we have gathered together a bunch of materials and resources for community groups, everything from redistricting manuals to what the redistricting process is in all 50 states. And the main thing that we've done is trained 18 demographers and 12 social scientists who are committed to working pro bono with community groups to draw maps, to do the racially polarized voting analysis. And so through the redistrictinginstitute.org website, if you want a demographer now to come look at your county and see where have the population shifts been, just like Judy showed us for Los Angeles, what is that data like for your local area? We have folks ready now, trained on Maptitude, who can do that work for you. So, so I really urge people to think now about getting involved. But I also had a question, if I could ask Julie to talk a little bit more about how the department, those of you who are from Section 5 states, the community contacts that the section has, and how you can have a role in the Section 5 process.
Yeah, thanks, Nita. I meant to mention that and didn't. That it's very critical for us in our review of Section 5 submissions to have comment from the community affected by the change, so we can understand better how that change is going to impact the minority community. We really, we look at the data and we do outreach to folks the jurisdiction tells us to outreach to. And then if we know of contacts already in the minority community, we'll reach out to them. But certainly proactive work on your part, and we publish on our website, and we're working on trying to make this in an even more accessible format, a list of submissions as they come in. Because we only have 60 days to review a submission to determine whether or not we're going to either seek more information, which gets us 60 more days, or interpose an objection or pre-clear. So the time window is very short, but we publish what we get on the web, and then that way, as a community group, you can know what changes have been submitted, and certainly you should try in the redistricting context to find out what's the process, when the plans are being drafted, again, transparency, and then you can be in a position to work with others in your community to determine how you can best comment on what a community of interest is, or how this particular line drawing may or may not be beneficial to your ability to continue to elect candidates of choice. So it's a very critical part of our process is your engagement and your kind of being watchful of the processes around redistricting, as Congressman Watt said, at every level, county, city, school board. That's actually the most important stuff, is at that level.
So you all, now you understand how difficult this is. We're not getting really the official information until April of 2011. I mean, we're getting preliminary information now, so these folks can try to start to project out and try to be positioned to be ready to help you in your local communities and your state legislative districts, draw those districts. But we won't have the official information until April of 2011. That's right.
Prior to April 1st is our deadline. So February, March.
Prior to April 1st. So we're pushing the census to try to get that information out as quickly as possible. But we can't wait until April 1st of 2011 to put in place the mechanisms to be effective players in this, because the other side, the people who are not interested in having us represented effectively, or who are interested in having us represented, but they would like for all of us to be in one congressional district or one city council district so that they can control all of the rest of the districts. This is a very, very complex thing, and it's a dance that we're doing that is very difficult to do. If those of you who are here don't understand, we couldn't give you a final recipe for doing this today because we don't have the information to do it yet, right? But we are getting ready. And additionally, I should say that as we did 10 years ago, the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, not the foundation, 501c3 foundation, we can talk to you about this all we want, but we can't do political stuff. The foundation can't do political stuff. But the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, which is a 501c4 organization, can go over and do nonpartisan. We're not partisan, but we can try to develop resources to help people draw districts, not for the benefit of Democrats or Republicans, but for fairness reasons. And so the Congressional Black Caucus Institute is trying to fashion a process for being helpful to local communities, as well as fashion a process that's going to be protective of existing minority districts in Congress, and looking at whether there are possibilities for creating additional minority districts at each level. So all of that's going on, and we wanted you to know that this is a work in process. I started this by saying we thought it was going to be an issue issues forum. It became a brain trust because this is an ongoing undertaking. We have not been able to just put this whole voting rights redistricting thing behind us and go on to other issues. This is an ongoing process, which is why the Congressional Black Caucus has a brain trust that works on this all the time, which is why they say I'm supposed to be leading that brain trust. So I wonder about that sometime. Okay, now we've got some time, a little bit of time, not a lot, for people to come to the microphone and if I could ask you, as a prelude to addressing us, to tell us who you are and where you're from, and don't give a speech, and please talk about what we are here to talk about today, which is the redistricting process. Now, this is a voting rights brain trust, and we have discussions every year about all different aspects of voting rights. But this year is too critical for us to spend a bunch of time talking about other things in the voting rights area. This is about redistricting. So please respect what we're here about and restrict yourself to that. Yes, sir.
I'm Asa Gordon. I'm Executive Director of the Douglas Institute of Government, and I also chair of something called D.C. Green Electoral College Task Force. I have a civil action that directly depends on the redistricting.
You have what?
I have a civil action that's pending in the U.S. Court of Appeals, okay, District of Columbia right now, that directly relates to the problem of redistricting. There are 5 southern states, Georgia, Louisiana, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Texas, that award their presidential electors on a winner-take-all basis, but don't have a winner-take-all stature. So the civil action is saying that in those instances, you must apportion your presidential electors on a proportional basis. I'll be subject to Title II USC Section 6, which is the reduction of representation clause. Now, I also want to put this in context of what she was saying about prisoners.
I appreciate what you're saying, but
the question is to her about prisoners.
Ask the question, please,
okay,
and relate it to what we're here to talk about today. We can talk about how we do electoral college next year, because we got 2 more years to do that. We don't have that luxury this year.
Okay, can I relate it to?
Go right ahead.
Yes, you talked about that there are states in which they are actually increasing their representation in Congress predicated on the ability to count their prison population. I suggest that you may look at that Section 2 of the Constitution then will mandate that they reduce their representation in proportion to that population that cannot vote, which are those, as felons, while you're counting them for the purpose of representation. Just look at that as a possibility to explore.
In the folders that I mentioned, we have a guide that talks more about prison-based gerrymandering, and I'd be happy to have a longer exchange with you to talk more in depth about your theory after the panel. But the one larger point I'll make is this. The Legal Defense Fund, we consider ourselves the civil rights law firm of Black America, and to the extent that there are these kinds of issues that arise during the redistricting cycle, please turn to us as a resource. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Von Seal Jones Hill. I am a city councilwoman, city of Dallas, Texas. I wonder if the resources which have been referenced here are available at the request of individual council members, or are those resources available only at the request of the larger entity, in my case, the city, which interest may be contrary to the individual council member interest?
Let me see if I can be responsive, and then I can ask Judy and Anita about how they approach this. But we are trying to marshal a system where the resources can be available to people who look like us, right? Now, we can't do it on a partisan basis, but you know, there are interest groups out there who are interested in representing the interest of women only, right? They do that. The Congressional Black Caucus Institute, if we can put this project together, will be looking at whether we can maximize the impact of this for African Americans and other minorities, right? So our anticipation is not to turn this over to a state. It is, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we have to work with state legislators who are drawing the congressional districts and state House and Senate districts. We have to work with local city councils and county commissioners. So, you know, there is some interchange here. But our expectation is that if we can get this to operate like we'd like, we would want to be a resource to individual elected officials who are African American. Now,
Advancement projects are the system, mapping system, and the work that we'll be doing. We're also providing legal counsel to folks. Will really be available to nonprofit grassroots organizations that represent communities of color. The system itself, to the extent that we're in various places, we're not going to build out this online mapping system will not exist for 50 states. But in the states that we're in, it will actually be an online mapping system. So you as a representative would be able to use it yourself and be able to get folks to help you. But we, because we're a nonprofit organization, will be working with nonprofits around drawing the maps and providing the analysis, but the system itself will be available to a wider group of people.
Anita, you want to talk about the way you all are approaching this?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We are working, we've been working with city councilors from South Carolina, from North Carolina. There's also a very good publication by Alliance for Justice that talks about the extent to which nonprofits can be involved in the redistricting process, even though we are talking to elected officials, but the short answer is yes.
So the answer to your question is we are trying to, everybody's trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Congressman Watt. I'd like to thank you for having this redistricting session. I attend it every year, and 10 years ago, the information that the panelists provided and through the years has helped me in the state, and now I'm on the city council. And I want to thank the LDF for assisting me in Kansas City, because we, unlike any other jurisdiction that I know of, is foolishly now doing redistricting without certified census data, purely for political purposes for the upcoming mayoral and city council.
Tell us who you are. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm Sharon Sanders Brooks from Kansas City, Missouri. And my question, other than the thank you for the LDF, is for the Justice Department. I asked our city our general counsel to contact the Justice Department to get some guidance. And he stated he contacted the Justice Department, the Civil Rights Division, and he was told that the Justice Department does not provide, you only come in after we have violated the Voting Rights Act. And I find that suspect, and I wanted to hear directly from you, what is the policy of the Civil Rights Division?
It all depends on what you mean by technical assistance. I mean, we actually don't go, I mean, what we try to provide is information about, we put a lot of information on our website about the kinds of agreements we enter into, the kind of enforcement actions that we do. I don't know what particular.
We are not a pre-clearance state.
No, I know
Missouri
that.
is
no,
not.
I know that. So I don't
Should have
really know
been, but
what-
we're not.
I don't know what the particular question is, if you have a legal question, how we would interpret something. It is hard for a law enforcement agency to provide sort of technical assistance and guidance in any particular matter, frankly, because we don't really, that's not really our role. Our role is to sort of give you all the information that we know about, to show you our consent decrees, to show you how we understand the law, and then, in the appropriate circumstance, to notify jurisdictions that we think they're violating the law. But we actually don't do a lot of, we provide materials, but not one-on-one counseling of jurisdictions. We generally
Which
don't.
is why we're trying to set up parallel mechanisms to provide the kind of technical assistance. The Justice Department technically doesn't provide technical assistance for drawing districts.
No.
They have to evaluate
No, just the
them.
whole process
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
suspect, but fortunately, during the information I've received here, I was able to put it out to them, things that they needed to do, and using this guide and making sure that we were taped and everything is on record for those that choose to file litigation against the city. My primary concern, there are 13 council members, 3 African Americans, that our vote not be diluted. Our 2 city council districts that are predominantly African American not be diluted in this rush to judgment process without any certified data, any voting age population data.
Thank you. And before you go, let me, I know Kristen has to leave because she has a flight.
Oh, I had a
so
specific question for
Did you
her.
have a specific question? Anybody else in line have a specific question for her?
I have to go too.
So she says she thinks she's missed the flight anyway. I was wondering how she was going to get from here to National Airport by 5:30. I think she'll be on the next, the 6:30 shuttle, if I had to guess. So
Okay.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, sorry about that. All right, well, my name is Tanua Thrash, and I'm from California. I represent the organization called the Green Lining Institute. It's a statewide multi-ethnic organization, and we're working very hard on redistricting in California, and we'll be working to address communities of interest, try to identify who they are, as well as draw maps beginning next year. My question has to do with the move towards citizens redistricting commissions. As more and more states move towards having independent citizens redistricting commissions, what impact do you think that that will have on communities of color? And again, this is something that has happened in other states, but as you know, in California, in 2008, there will be an independent appointed 14-member citizens commission to draw the state assembly and state senate seats, which means that our current tri-caucus members and statewide representatives will not be involved in that process at all. So just wondering what you think the impact will be on communities of color across the country.
It's an excellent question. For those of you who don't know about independent redistricting commissions, this is essentially a movement among good government groups who seek to strip away the responsibility for redrawing boundary lines, take that power away from elected officials and assign it to a small body of individuals who are presumably nonpartisan.
Presumably.
Presumably. We're deeply skeptical and concerned about these proposals for independent redistricting commissions. We oppose the commission that's been put in place in California. We know at the very early stages of the application process, where they were identifying individuals to serve on this commission, that the applicant pool didn't reflect the great diversity of the state of California.
Right.
And whether at the end of the day you can have a small body of nonpartisan individuals, I think is questionable. I think that we've got to wait and see how the process plays out. Arizona has an independent redistricting commission. During the last cycle, their redistricting plan drew an objection from the Justice Department. They reduced minority population percentages in state legislative districts in 5 areas around the state. So these commissions don't have a very long track record. With at least the elected, the way we do it now, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And we, through the Voting Rights Act, have fought very hard to put in place legislatures that reflect the diversity of our nation, and you lose that with the move to commission. So we're deeply skeptical. We have a publication that talks more about the commissions, and I urge you all, should you hear about these proposals, to take a good look at them and to think carefully about whether or not they might put minority voters in a more vulnerable place before jumping on that bandwagon.
I had another quick question. May I?
Quick.
Yes. So the second one has to do with the fact that on the California ballot that has qualified as an initiative that will extend the role of this 14-member commission to congressional seats. And just wondering if this body, and especially being here at CBC, is aware that one of the largest African-American contingents comes from California to Congress, and how, if it's in the hands of a private citizens group, that might impact our ability to be represented nationally.
We are aware of that. Maxine Waters and Diane Watson and all of the folks from California won't ever let us not be aware of that. So, yes, we are aware of that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My question, two questions for Kathy, actually. One is with respect to the...
Tell us who you are.
I'm sorry, Damon Hewitt with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and I work with these great folks, a lot of them on the dais every day. Question about the school district reference maps. Could you elaborate? Because I've never heard of these before, and I want to get a sense of what data is included and what's their intended use, because I can think of a host of unintended uses that can have negative consequences. And I'll just draw out the second question so you can answer if you have time. Is Advancement Project and the Legal Defense Fund, a lot of other organizations have filed a number of lawsuits and done a lot of advocacy on behalf of people who are displaced because of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And our understanding is that any of those individuals who are not back in their homes on the Gulf Coast, many of them from New Orleans, by April 1st of 2010, were not counted as residents. That has some pretty dire consequences, or pretends some pretty dire consequences for representation in New Orleans and the affected region, and we all know who was most affected in terms of displacement. So if you could speak to those questions, I'd appreciate it.
Before you do, can we just applaud the participation of our representatives from the Justice Department and my good friend Julie Fernandez. Thank you so much. I know you've got to leave. She's got to go take care of the president. So, all right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. Goodbye, Julie. I will take the easy question first, and that's regarding the school district reference maps. After every decennial census, we work with the states evaluating how well we complied with Public Law 94-171, which is to give folks the geographic data they need with the tables that they need to do their legislative redistricting. The law is actually very specific about legislative redistricting. And following the 2000 census, what the states told us was they wanted to see summary level data for school districts. And that is different in every state. In my home state of Maryland, that's county equivalent. So the reference map will be a state map showing the 24 counties, and that will be the school district reference map. However, there are many states where school districts are defined by where the bus stops and turns around, and the geography gets very complicated. We also have 3 types of school districts across the country: unified, elementary, and secondary. So you have a lot of geographies that are crossing each other, and when you get into a state that's more complicated, these reference maps will be at the state level, but they will show the boundaries of those maps and label the type of school district that is being displayed on the map. And it's meant to be a companion product to the data, so that people, when they're looking at the data for a particular school district and they're looking at the demographics for it, these maps primarily are we haven't gotten any requests to plot paper. They're going to be in PDF format. And I might make a plug right now, based on an earlier question, to say that all of our data will be publicly available, so that if you're interested in using our data, once we confirm bipartisan receipt with those officials that we've mailed the data to, it will be deployed on our American Fact Finder. And if you have my presentation, my website for the Redistricting Data Office, all you have to do is go there, and you'll be able to hit the URLs for the different products. So hopefully that answers your question about the school district maps. The second question regarding displaced residents of the New Orleans area after Hurricane Katrina. It is true that we will count people where they are. We try to get them counted once, and only once, in the geography where they are currently located. We did do a lot of work in the Gulf Coast region to promote the census and to make folks aware that these were the requirements of the Census Bureau established with our residency rules. And so hopefully we did a good job there in explaining how we count folks. It has been an issue. I understand your concern. Louisiana, I think, in terms of where they were in 2000 and where they are in 2010, we'll see differences in the data. I talked about the geography being very rich, so the geography will be there to support the data that come out and to be able to define exactly where the most pronounced changes are found.
Okay, I'll throw out a question. I don't expect an answer because I'm taking the privilege. What does that mean in terms of the benchmark? What's the baseline? Is it relevant anymore for redistricting a Section 5 analysis? Who knows?
The rhetorical question.
That's rhetorical, or is there somebody on the panel who can address that? The non-lawyer may not, the census may not.
No.
Kristen? You don't know? Okay.
Not sure.